Well, hey there team, and welcome back to the channel, and welcome back to Worth Your Time, Worth Your Money, an ongoing segment that we're bringing back to the channel after a little bit of a hiatus, where I have a look at the opening hours of a game, and then I basically convey my thoughts to you. It's short and punchy, we keep it around 10 minutes, very broad strokes info so you can make up your mind on your own. Today we're having a look at Seafarer, the ship sim. So I've been chipping away at this already, and I'm not sure how the rollout will go because we're actually going to do shared split content between my two, which is to say there will be episodes to follow of my opening hours with this game, depending on popularity, but at least the very first half hour. So keep an eye out for that on the channel. Perhaps it's already up, or maybe it's going to follow this. Again, a little bit of preamble. I'm finding the balance between the two formats. And, you know, not to bury the lead, so far, I'm enjoying myself quite a bit. It's got a bit of jank, right? And I've also got a lot of bias. I'm, ex-Navy. I don't bang the drum too hard, but I do come from a seafaring background. And it's been, as far as like a seafaring simulator of modern ship stuff, moving slowly, dare I say kind of boring for some, it actually does nail that mouthfeel, right? That vibe of modern seafaring. Don't get me wrong, I love exaggerated stuff like Sea of Thieves. Oh my god, I shouldn't even mention that because the water physics in that are so good. Like, just generally speaking, if something is seafaring, I'll give it a go, given my career bias. But this one's really going for that simulation space, right? And as such, it carries a lot of the tropes, disadvantages of those who enter the simulator arena, which is to say, it's being developed by a AA indie publisher, Astragon Entertainment. I looked them up. I've covered a couple of their things over time. I've got something sitting in my library I haven't quite looked at yet. Firefighter game that came out recently. They've done some simulators, but interestingly, they don't really do a lot of internal development. Generally speaking, it's just them as a publisher, and the internal devs are whoever, right? Which is kind of the play these days when you jump and become a publisher. All of this is to say that this game is actually developed by Astragon Development. And I went through about like 10, 12 of their published titles, and I couldn't find the last one that they internally devved. So my assumption is that this is actually kind of their big project from their internal team, and they've probably been working on it for years and years and years. But again, like I said, those trappings of that kind of developer, they're going for hyper-realism, but they're never going to really truly have that budget. And, I've said this before, stylized graphics beat out hyper-realism every single day, even in the AAA space. All these games that are coming out now, oh wow, that's so pretty. In a couple of years' time, they will start to slip a bit more uncanny valley, a bit more noticeable. It's just the nature of the beast. And then when you are a lower budget AA indie studio going for it, it's going to look janky, it's going to look rough, and I think it's generally a misstep. So, they're going for kind of one-to-one real-world ships and all that, and it's cool in the fidelity of the gameplay coming out of it. Like, at the moment, I've been working my way through the early stages. They're pretty good at hand-holding and teaching you and meting out how the game works. I've gotten up to a point where I'm like driving a cargo ship now from point A to point B, and they throw you like engine room troubles. You have spare parts, and the engine room breaks down. You got to go down there, and it's really cool to see, the two drivetrains, the engine 1, engine 2, and then triaging it. It's fairly light. You check if it's got an oil filter problem or whatever, and you do a clicky mini game, that sort of thing. So it's not super intense, but again, it's there, and they're sort of going for it, and I can't really think of any other great examples of this sort of attempt at a more realistic take on, the seagoing experience. And again, one of the sort of tropes bundled in from that is, I alluded to it earlier, I think some people might find this game boring, but in the same sense that some people might find like Euro Truck Simulator boring, right? Driving hours and hours of cargo. Though I've only ever really played that a little bit, but I always thought that maybe the trips get longer later on. In the early going, they're still fairly short. But even in this, some of the earlier trips from point A to point B, they take a while, right? You're chugging along, you're doing micro adjustments. You can't just leave it unattended because there is a current system. It's not again as exaggerated as something like Sea of Thieves. But you can't just fire and forget. You do have to stay on the helm and move it 10 degrees, 20 degrees port and starboard to avoid other vessels and all that. So you have to still be attentive, but there's a lot of pregnant pauses. There's a lot of long time in between. So again, this is to say that some will find that boring. Others will find that zen, right? And I understand that for sure. So again, it's one of those check your requirements for input and ADHD sensitivity, because if you do find things like trucking sims and that boring, you might want to skip on this. However, saying that, it's given me multiple options for multiple careers with different entities. Now, again, it's still slow burning and it's still early days from my time with it, and I've favored more of the big lumbering cargo route, and that's been cool, loading containers onto the ship, and you've got little sort of docking helpful things that close enough is good enough, and then you can press a button to suction cup yourself into the dock. So it still does have some arcadey, gamey mechanics threaded through it. But one of the other career options that was offered out to me was to pick up like a little speedboat jet rib and reenact sea patrol doing, well, you know, more defensive operations. It listed off a few things like, you know, fighting fires and I suppose apprehending people. So that's a little bit more adrenaline pumping. So that's still to be seen. But again, these videos are just a surface level at those first few hours of gameplay. And when you have a game that is designed for the slow lumbering burn, there is only so much I can really look at before I put this video out in front of you. Interestingly, it's put me in a lot of ships that have thruster pods without going into it too much. These are omnidirectional, fully, you know, 360 degree rotatable impulse engines. So they don't really drive how you'd think they'd drive. You know, for the most part, ships kind of drive like a rear wheel car because they're kind of designed the same way. You got rudders and screws coming out the backside. But it was interesting because that is actually how tugs are, because tugs require that fidelity of movement and maneuverability in a small space, like in a pier or, you know, in the heads, that sort of thing. So I think the very first ship that they put you on is a tug and get you doing tug operations. And it was good. It was kind of tricky, throw you in the deep end and get a bit befuddled and discombobulated. But yeah, look, so far I'm enjoying it. I am. It seems to... What's got me most curious is how the underlying systems work, how the traffic moves around, and it's not like there's really an economy per se, so I still think it's all fairly simple. They've built out a very huge play space, and they do this kind of flex flyby with a seagull to show off how pretty the intro is, and that's good for them. I'm okay with that. You're proud of your handiwork. That's very cool. But again, given, you know, the minigame mechanics being fairly basic and simple and moving around and the other ships just seeming to be kind of bland NPCs, I do wonder what sort of, dare I say, depth there is to this game. It seems you can hire people further on down the track and build up your business, buy spare parts, that sort of stuff. So down the rabbit hole we go, and if you want to keep up to date with further impressions as we go deeper in the game, just keep track of it on the channel. It's one of those things where I'll continue doing episodes of Let's Plays as long as there is interest, right? There's still too many games to play, and I only get so many eyeballs of the market on me anyway. But for my part, for this video, I think we've covered off the basics and given you an idea. I'm sure you could come away from this figuring out whether or not this is worth your time or worth your money. Anyway, and just look, at closing out as well, the channel's been a little bit of strife. I've put a few videos up and posts. Feel free to join the Discord and get around it, but I am looking to try and increase the channel membership amount at the moment, or amount of members is probably a better way to put it, as we may very well be closing the channel down in the next couple of months, just depending on earnings and where I go with my career on the back end. But safe to say, I plan on juggling both Let's Plays and this format. It would seem that through experimenting with both of them, I've now curated a base of fans that like both formats, or this one and not that one. So we're just going to try and juggle and spin both plates. Let me know if you have any thoughts around any of this. Any feedback is always welcome, but I don't want to waffle more than that. So let's wrap it up, team. Might just leave it there for the time being, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.